Welcome to episode 51 of the Mental Dietitian Podcast. I'm your host, Lynch-potter. And before I start here, I just want to let you guys know I had a very good hug just then before I jumped on this podcast. It is currently about 7 a.m. in the morning. And I woke up, I was kind of having a little bit of anxiety today. I don't know what it was really about and whatever. And Lexi and I just shared a really nice hug and dude, go hug someone. If you're having a shitty day, just ask for a hug. Holy shit. Hugs are great. They are just such a good way to start your day. So if you have a significant other, give them a hug. If you don't, ask your friend to give you a good hug, because there's actually a lot of science behind it. How it makes you feel. It can drastically lower your cortisol levels really, really quickly, which is really crazy. It's because humans are not meant to be isolated. We're meant to be in community with other humans. So if we isolate and we don't ever get a hug or touch or anything like that, no, not even in a romantic way, just a hug from someone, just love from somewhere, it really messes you up, and you really notice when you're not getting it. And I just had a good hug, and I wanted to share with you guys because it was a great way to start my day, and it honestly changed my state pretty much instantly, which is really, really cool. But anyway, today's episode is about, I'm going to tell you a story, and I'm kind of working on some stuff right now within myself and doing this inner work on myself and going back in time and looking at all these men that bullied me when I was a young man, a little boy growing up, and how that affected me and how that has shaped my reality. And there was definitely some emotion that was stuck there. And I was able to release some of it the other day. Had a call with my good friend Marcus, and he's learning how to coach people. And we got pretty deep. We uncovered some stuff. I had no idea it was even there. I literally not a clue. And then I started seeing all these other points in my life where I was like, man, that fucking hurt, that hurt, that hurt. And I haven't really dealt with any of that. And I basically came across this realization that life will punish you or redirect you anytime you're not being true to who you really are. And that was the lesson that I learned. And let me tell you the story of how I came across this and what I'm kind of working on right now. Maybe it will resonate with you, maybe it won't. But I can honestly say that most of us in our lives at one point have changed who we are to fit into a group of people or to a certain environment or to a certain workplace or even into a relationship or even around our parents, which has then kind of spliced us in a way where we're creating an avatar. It's not really us. We're just creating a certain survival mechanism so that we are accepted in that environment or within that group of people. So when I was about 13 or 14, everybody was on MSN Messenger, right? And I started talking to this girl, and she was from another city. I think her name was Sophie, and she was really pretty. And we started talking for weeks and weeks and weeks. I think it might have even been, it was weeks and weeks and weeks. And she was from South Australia, and I was from Western Australia, and we were talking, and we talked all the time. We talked late into the night, and I kind of started to like her. I was only 13 or 14. She was this really pretty blonde girl, and I was like, man, she's hot. And one day I get to school, and everybody's kind of looking at me weird and like snickering. And I remember that, what the hell's going on? And like, there was these pieces of paper that people were handing around. And it was all the print off of my conversation with this girl, Sophie. And there was all this stuff on there. And I was basically, even when I say it now, I can feel it. It's like I don't want to talk about it, which is a perfect example. If you have things that as soon as you bring them up and they're really tough to talk about, you haven't really processed them. You haven't done that inner work to kind of release that shit, and it's stuck. It's stuck in there. So I can even feel it now. Maybe there's still some work to do. I'm sure there is. There's always work to do. But I can feel a hesitancy to share this story because it really, really hurt me at the time. And it really shaped me in a way that I'll get to later. But anyway, let's finish this story. Oh, man. And they were handing around these conversations, and I was like, and like everybody was laughing at me, and like all these things I said that like I partied all the time. I was this tough guy. I wasn't really a tough guy. I grew flowers at home. I played the clarinet. I was this sensitive, beautiful guy that basically it wasn't safe to be that dude anymore because you're a little fag, is what people would say. And that is, you could take what I just said and be like, oh, that's homophobic. Yeah, people were back then. And they would tease you. And if you showed any kind of sensitivity or any kind of weakness or any expression of emotion that wasn't anger at that age or toughness, then people gave you a hard time. And that's just a lot of the way that young men grow up. And I was basically saying all this stuff that wasn't me, that I got a bunch of girls, that people really liked me, that I was really popular, that I could beat anybody in drinking, that I surfed the biggest waves. And basically what I was doing is I was creating this image that I thought that people liked. And I was saying it to this girl. This girl ended up being one of my friends. In my friend group, there's a friend group of about 5 or 6 of us. And he basically pretended to be that girl for weeks and weeks and weeks, if not months, which just makes you think like, holy shit. What the fuck was wrong with that guy at that age? And then there's also me, which is, why did you feel like it wasn't safe to just be yourself? But that's okay. I was 13, 14. But anyway, the whole school freaking read it. It was humiliating. Everybody was laughing at me. It sucked, man. And I ran away from school. I remember running away from school, and I just wanted to die. I just wanted to leave this world. I was like, fuck this, man. Like, I remember hiding in a bush, and teachers were calling my phone. Like, my mom was calling. I just didn't even pick up. I just disappeared I disappeared from like lunchtime, which was about 12 to like 4. I was like, I sat in this bush and I cried and I cried and I cried and I was humiliated. And I sat with that the other day, and I was sitting there and I was feeling back into that. And I was like, man, that sucked. And there was this message. It's like, life will punish you when you're not true to yourself. And that was the lesson. And I see it now. I see it 18 years later, 17, 18 years later. But it doesn't change the fact that it really hurt me. And it really made me not trust friends. I thought he was my friend. And basically, it was all a facade. And it really alienated me. And it really, really hurt. I'll just tell you right now, it really, really hurt me. And I could list off a bunch of other people, especially men, that treated me that way at that age. And I found a common thread between every single one of them. Every single one of them came from broken homes, which means their mum and dads weren't together. One of my bullies, his mum, unfortunately, committed suicide, and he was only about 7 or 8 years old. Horrible. Another one, yeah, they all came from broken homes. They all came from families because obviously when you go to school, you see whose people's parents are. every single one of these boys came from a home where their dads were very kind of closed off emotionally. I just remember their dads. I remember what they were like. I came from a home where my dad was very open emotionally and he expressed his emotions in a beautiful way and the way that I can now. And I'm like, holy shit. Is it possible that I got bullied because I was a mirror for what these kids were not? And then they wanted to hurt me because I was what they were not getting. I was getting the love and the affection from my dad that they weren't getting. It's a possibility. There's many different possibilities, and it's important to talk about it. And I want to talk about this kind of stuff, especially as a man, especially on this podcast, because this shit affects us. It affects us. Basically, I'm 30 years old, and there's still some points and there's still some areas in my life where I don't feel like it's okay to be myself. I still feel like there's some times where I have to close off, put this persona up of being this hard ass, badass, like I don't give a fuck kind of guy. And it's just not me. It's just not who I am. I'm this kind of open, loving person that's sensitive and likes plants. I got my little plant, Rhonda, right here. This is Lexi's plant. I think her name's Rhonda. Hopefully I didn't give you the wrong name, but I love plants and I love music and I love this kind of stuff, but I also like jujitsu and I also like kickboxing, and you can like it all. You don't have to fit yourself into a little box. But all of this and all of this I'm explaining reminds me of a quote that I heard Peter Crone said. If you don't follow him on social media or listen to podcasts with him, they call him the mind architect. And he says that he kind of was given that name because he dissolves structures that people have built in their minds about who they are. And he says, I use the word dissolve because they were never real in the first place. We just made them to fit into our environment. He has this quote, and it says, life will keep giving you people and circumstances to reveal where you are not free. So if life keeps giving people circumstances, and it gave me circumstances at 13 years old, it will give you circumstances your entire life, and it'll be like, hey, this is where you're not free. If you choose to see it that way, other people could be very easily think that life's against them and that they're a victim and that everything that happens to them is outside of their control, which is a very horrible, hopeless reality, which means you have no power over yourself and your decisions. But that I had all, it's all kind of coming together. I was like, man, it just keeps showing you if you're not being true to yourself, things will happen that will suck. It'll hurt, and it'll only hurt because you're not being true to yourself. And you can't lose. I don't think you can lose if you're truly being true to yourself. What I mean by that is like, oh, what if I'm true to myself and really told these people how I feel, they wouldn't be friends with me anymore. Well, maybe they're friends with the avatar that you created, and who you really are is not meant to be with these people. And then you'll find people and you'll attract people that are truly meant for you because they're meant for you, not meant for the avatar that you've created. This ego projection of who you want to be, but maybe not who you really are. And you might lose everything. You might lose your job because you don't want to be there anymore. You might lose your relationship. You might lose a bunch of friends. You might lose some family members. But if you're really being true to yourself and you know you're being true to yourself, you can't lose. Because what is meant for you will come into your life, and what isn't meant for you will leave your life. And I honestly believe that not many people in this world ever get to the point where they're being truly aligned with themselves. A lot of us will change in certain situations because if this person really saw who I am, maybe they wouldn't like me. And that's one of my greatest fears. If this person really understood and I really showed them all the stuff, if I cried in front of this person, if I felt this emotion in front of this person, maybe they wouldn't love me anymore because maybe they'll think I'm weak, which is very interesting because it's basically saying that showing emotions is weak. And where did that belief come from? It came from growing up between 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, and starting to show these different emotions in front of these boys. And they're like, no, that's not okay. It's no longer okay to cry because of this. You have to not cry anymore. Men don't cry. Men suppress their emotions and they do what's right. And they never get tired and they never give up. And that's what a man is. No, that's what a fucking robot is. I'm a human being and I'm a man and I feel shit and I'm gonna let it out because I'm not gonna keep it stored up, and I'm not going to end up like a lot of there's these men out there that just keep it all in. And all they need is a good hug, and all they need to do is just feel like it's a safe place to kind of release all this stuff. But unfortunately, that's just how it is. And life is not a Disney movie. Not everybody makes it. Not everybody is going to have this awareness around their emotions, and not everybody is going to have this. And even when I'm talking right now, I know this is for a very specific audience. I'd love for everybody to kind of hear this message about, hey, you can't lose if you're being true to yourself. You can never lose. You always win. It might take years of decluttering your life and decluttering these things that are not meant for you, but you can never, ever lose if you're being true to yourself. It's impossible. I have too much evidence to prove it. And I think that when you're hearing this, that it's true. Doesn't mean it's not scary. And when you hear this, you might be like, oh, but I don't want to do that. I don't want to let go of that thing. What if you make a lot of money at a job that isn't meant for you? What if you have all the things that you want in a certain relationship, all the things that it's kind of good enough, but it's not meant for you? Or if you have friendships, they're good people, but it's not meant for you. If you have a relationship with your mom or your dad or your sister, your brother, but the relationship's toxic and you're like, well, but they're my mom and my dad. I got to make it work. Sometimes you don't. This isn't a Disney movie. Not everybody makes it. And that's a hard message to hear. And I understand why people create these avatars and these ways of trying to fit in this world that are not in congruency with themselves. I understand it. I still do it sometimes. All I'm saying is, if you start doing the work and sitting there and going back in your life and feeling some of these feelings, the answers will come to you of why you act certain ways in certain situations. And once you're aware of these things, you can really start healing it and then like flushing it out and like changing who you are, really changing who you are. Because you could read all the books, listen to all the podcasts, go to every Tony Robbins seminar, go to all of these things. But if you don't, it's just kind of like, I see it as you kind of like shooting a shotgun of information at a cement wall. It's like some of the stuff will maybe go into the cement wall, this information, all these shotgun pellets, all this personal growth, and maybe you just keep shooting, it'll break down the wall, maybe. Wouldn't it make more sense to dissolve the wall, which was created a long time ago? So when you start listening to things, it goes straight in. You're like, oh, cool. It's like this feeling of like, well, I don't think I deserve that. It's just like, well, you could listen to every seminar and you could do all the affirmations in the world. But if you have a deep belief that you don't deserve that because you don't think you're enough because a bunch of people told you weren't, you're just basically gaslighting yourself and saying like, I'm awesome. I am amazing. I am full of wealth, all this kind of stuff, all these affirmations, all this personal growth stuff, all these other podcasts, all this stuff. But it won't sink in because you haven't sat there and be like, hey man, that fucking kid bullied me and that fucking hurt really bad. Or my mom and dad broke up and that fucking sucked. Man. And you got to feel all that stuff. And then once you felt it, the lessons will come, like the lesson I got the other day, which was life will just punish you if you're not being true to yourself. And if you're being true to yourself, you can't lose. And really feeling and really understanding that for the first time in a very, very long time. And I've still got a lot of work to do, and I look forward to sharing it with you. And hopefully, if you got this far in the podcast and just listen to me, just no script, spitting out of my heart, just trying to communicate how I feel with you. Hopefully, it gives you permission to do that within yourself, which I believe will create change. It'll create change within yourself, and it'll create growth that is so huge that it's hard to comprehend. The way that you look at the world can change within a few days of doing some really heavy emotional lifting. It takes courage. And I wish you all the best on that journey. And I will keep being here. I will keep releasing these podcasts. I will keep doing things. I'm going to keep doing stuff, work on myself. And I'm going to share my struggles, share my triumphs, share everything on here, because it's almost like a therapeutic way of doing it. And I've had feedback that it helps you guys too. So love you all. Hope you have a great week, and I'll talk to you next week.